a dream. Almost like a premonition.
I think there's an attack coming.
My lord, this world will fall.
Live from the lush landscapes of Metropolis, welcome back to Zack Snyder's Justice League, chapter by chapter, episode 3. I am your host, the real Brad Bell, and today we will be diving into part 2 of Zack Snyder's Justice League, The Age of Heroes, providing review / commentary. So let's go ahead and get into it. If you are one of the few who is following along on HBO Max, I'm actually going to be hitting play at part 2 at 37 minutes and 7 seconds, which is where the part 2 title card pops up. So here we go. Part 2, The Age of Heroes. We see the boom tube opening up, and we are in that Russian landscape. Now, let's use Russia loosely. I'm assuming that this is Chernobyl, which is in Ukraine, which of course was part of the Soviet Union for multiple decades. So this area Steppenwolf mentions is toxic. It is something evil about it, and this is where he's going to set up his home base. And if you've seen this film or the 2017 version of the film, you will know that this will give us our climax. This is where he's going to start to, in many ways, terraform Chernobyl in preparation for the arrival of Darkseid, if he is able to collect all 3 mother boxes. Is also where he is going to interact with members of the New Gods. I don't need to mention how menacing Steppenwolf looks. There's this lot of meme stuff going around about him looking like a koala bear. I don't know what type of koala bears you guys saw as a kid, but he doesn't resemble that to me at all. He definitely looks more menacing than someone such as Thanos. When I see Thanos, I see Josh Brolin in a mocap suit, albeit a powerful performance. When I see this, I see Steppenwolf. So now we move from what is presumably Chernobyl, and we are getting some banter back and forth between Alfred and Bruce Wayne. They are moving to their second target in their recruitment for the Justice League. Their first, of course, was Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. We will see how that turns out shortly. And I love the back and forth between this Bruce and this Alfred. And I'm going to tell you why. There's so much alluded to. I would love to see this version of Batman played out over multiple films across 2 decades, and that is what is said here in Zack Snyder's Justice League, that Batman has waged a one-man, not just one man, because we know there was a Robin there, right? A mostly one-man war on crime for 20 years in Gotham, and we saw that alluded to in BVS, and it's mentioned again here. But you can kind of headcanon this if you want to and say, oh, this was the what the Michael Keaton version becomes, or the Schumacher Keaton version becomes. Of course, that's not the case. I know some people did headcanon that away. I think it's a true shame we're never going to get to see that version of Batman play out. Almost would be awesome if The Batman, featuring Robert Pattinson, was going to be the early crime-fighting career of this version of Batman. It is not, but I think that would be something that would be very cool. Now we have moved on from Bruce Wayne's private jet, and here we are in Star Labs, and we're going to get to Silas Stone, of course the father of Victor Stone, aka Cyborg, and he is working in and around the Kryptonian ship that was so central to these 3 Zack Snyder Justice League movies. I like how Silas, even though he's this upper level scientist who's portrayed as out of touch sometimes by his family, he takes time to speak to the janitor here. So it does show you that he is known as not just being a hard worker, but he is well liked in Star Labs, despite his son not being the biggest fan of him. And what this janitor of course, is going to encounter is one of these terrifying parademons who is in search of that mother box. Now, the mother boxes are part of the culture of New Genesis and Apocalypse, so they have a certain scent to them that the new gods have familiarized themselves with, and that the parademons are familiar with. If you're not too familiar with parademons, these are people who did at one point stand against Darkseid, but he conquered their world, their universe, and they are enslaved and forced to be in his army. And the parademons are just, I know henchmen can sometimes just be seen as disposable. I think this film does a really good job of not making the parademons seem like that or seem inept like even sometimes stormtroopers are seen throughout the Star Wars franchise. Now we have moved on from Star Labs though, and we see Queen Hippolyta, who is going to ignite an arch, and she is going to shoot it towards some type of ancient Greek infrastructure, building, monument, I don't know what you would call it. But apparently the only one that really is going to know what it means is a Amazonian or a Themyscirian. So once Diana sees this, once Wonder Woman sees this, she will know that it is universal stakes at play that are going to rise above anything in her solo film or even facing Doomsday in Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. This is a very cool scene here. The lighting on Hippolyta's face just from that arrow. Of course, you see this great shot. That 4:3 really plays well here as you see this ignited arrow going out of Themyscira, through the clouds, over the waterway, just tracking this the entire way. And it is going to ignite that Greek structure. This is where the film does a really good job of showing the real world consequences of what is occurring with the potential invasion of Darkseid and the invasion at hand of Steppenwolf and the parademons. I think Man of Steel especially does a great job of that, and the beginning of BVS does that as we open up with mankind's perspective on first meeting the Superman. We see Bruce go through that traumatic experience with an employee, Wally, who was later tragically killed by Lex Luthor in BVS. I think this is the only time, though, when this pyre is ignited at this ancient Greek infrastructure that we see how the real world from news footage reacts. Think about when we saw Doomsday attacking a BVS. I mean, we had Anderson Cooper covering that as if it were really happening on CNN. And unfortunately, we don't get that later on as the Justice League are doing battle with Darkseid's minions, Steppenwolf and the parademons in Chernobyl. But Wonder Woman immediately knows what this is, an invasion. And now we are back at Star Labs. Silas is here, and he is going to interact with Dr. Ryan Choi. Now, Ryan Choi will be the second Atom in DC Comics after Ray Palmer. You've probably seen Ray Palmer from the Arrow shows. That's who Brandon Routh portrayed on those shows for many years, and eventually on Legends of Tomorrow, doing a great job in that role. The best way I could describe Ray Palmer, let's say you're not a big DC fan, he is essentially the Hank Pym, so the original Ant-Man of the DCU, and you would kind of say Ryan Choi is the Scott Lang, although completely different, just legacy to those great roles of Atom and Ant-Man respectively. This Ryan Choi is perfect for a spinoff on HBO Max. I think it would be great to see an Atom show, a 5 or 6 episode miniseries. And I think Zack left HBO a lot to chew on and a lot to make a lot of money with we will see if they take him up on that. And I'm not just talking about the continuation of the Snyderverse, just the things you could spin out of this movie. And Ryan Choi's Adam being one of them. And now we see the people who were exposed are providing a artist rendering of the parademon that they encountered. And it's just kind of eerie seeing all these people isolated in the COVID-19 world that we live in. I think we're coming out of it, but still. And you got to keep in mind all this was filmed well before the pandemic. Here we have Silas entering his apartment. I'm assuming that Victor lives at this apartment with him, and he is alerting Victor of the parademons, who they both know are looking for the mother box, if you didn't know. And I think it's revealed here within the next hour or so of the film. The mother box, of course, is what he uses to resurrect Vic Stone, aka Cyborg. And now Wonder Woman has went to check out this ignited arrow, which is fizzled out at this point, but Hippolyta made her point that an invasion is coming. And now the question is, where is Diana going to turn after getting this news from her mom? Now, really, the only other two heroes she knows are Batman and Superman. Superman's dead, so we all know this is going to, of course, lead her to Bruce Wayne. This stuff was completely cut out because we're now going to see Diana do some almost Indiana Jones style spelunking here. She dives down into this ancient infrastructure. And this is the great thing about the character of Wonder Woman. She can be so much. Yes, she's the badass Amazonian warrior, but I really like how this film uses her long lifespan to focus on a career in archaeology. I have not read a ton of Wonder Woman comics. I read some of her at the beginning of the New 52 by Brian Azzarello when they redid Sensation Comics a couple years ago, which was the original Wonder Woman line. Of course, Batman had Detective, Superman had Action Comics. Both those still run, but Wonder Woman debuted in Sensation Comics, and they brought it back. I read some of those, but out of the big three, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, as much as my wife knows about her, as much as the mother of Beagles, Abby, loves her, and we have a poster of Wonder Woman from the great Martin Anson, a screen print, hanging next to our bed. I'm not an expert in the comic book wise in the lore of the character, so she could have done archaeology type stuff, but here we see her looking at some wall and carvings, and this is cool. They did a really good job on set design. The three mother boxes staring down at the top of this, which of course is going to serve as a warning, because as we are going to find out, this is not the first time that the agents of Apocalypse have tried to invade Earth as we know it. And this has been a consistent through line with Wonder Woman from the end of her solo film, directed by Patty Jenkins, through 1984. That sets up all the stuff with Cheetah, Wonder Woman, 1984, and now here in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and we see the engraving on the cave of the man himself, Darkseid. And here we cut to a scene that is still going to be some great character development as we build toward Aquaman embracing the League. Remember, this is all about uniting the seven, even though we have six. Of course, the seventh will be a character who is revealed here, John Jones. And we'll get there. It's cool to see Aquaman be heroic. Watching this now, it's like, why do we need this? You got to keep in mind, as I have mentioned in previous episodes of these Zack Snyder Justice League podcast, chapter by chapter, this is before we had an Aquaman movie. So Zack had to balance introducing And I know he had been introduced on the flash drive in Batman vs. Superman, but really introducing the King of Atlantis, or future King of Atlantis, and introducing Cyborg, and introducing the Flash to the DCEU, that was not his decision. That was Warner Brothers wanting to meddle once again and fast track to their team up movie that could compete with the MCU. Which I think if you do the characters correctly, it will compete organically with the MCU. If you try to mimic what Marvel's doing, it fails. Every time DC's done that in the comics, it fails. Usually, it works the other way around too. When Marvel tries to do that, it fails. And here we have this great slow-mo shot, the starry heavens above me. My wife's been playing this song on loop. I think she likes this shot for many, many reasons. I've seen a lot of criticism here of Aquaman. First of all, it's a cool looking scene. I don't think anybody will deny that. But here's the King of the Seven Seas, and he breaks a liquor bottle, and he is going to go into the ocean. While it looks mythical, it looks iconic as he takes his shirt off to enter the sea. Why is he littering? I don't quite know. That being said, this is before he has come to embrace and realize that role. He has just essentially been saving humans off the coast. He is not the King of Atlantis in the full orange and green suit that we see at the end of James Wan's Aquaman. And I think that is something a lot of people got to keep in mind when they are quick to criticize this version of Arthur Curry. This is the slow motion chef's kiss, the way that the waves collapse upon this version of Aquaman. And here's the first time that we would have seen this Aquaman underwater, and he's going to interact with Mira. Now, Aquaman, his dad is a human, not an Atlantean. He was a fisherman in some versions of the comic. Most of the time he was a lighthouse operator. He fell in love with Aquaman's mother. He is a half-breed, half-human, half-Atlantean. And he has a half-brother, Orm, played by Patrick Wilson, who there's a dispute between Atlanteans who should be the true heir to the Atlantean throne. Should it be Orm or should it be Aquaman, Arthur Curry? It's crazy to think that Zack Snyder was also asked to set up and establish Atlantis here. They put a lot on his plate to cut his legs out from under him. I don't want to sound repetitive. I apologize if I am. I just think this is the time to articulate and to know all of this. It's also where we see how they will communicate with these little air bubbles. Some people think that's, again, they have a problem with that, but makes sense for Arthur, especially considering he's half human. But we got to look at it from the audience perspective. They don't want to just watch Atlanteans stare at each other and do sign language. And they're not telepathic here, so we got to have a way for them to communicate. We see Volko here, who is portrayed by the great William Dafoe. This cast is crazy. Crazy to think we have two people from the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, because we have J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon here, and we have Dafoe as Falco. And they are afraid because their mother box. Keep in mind, we got 3 mother boxes. Cyborg has one, so that's the one for man. The Atlanteans have one. And of course, the Amazonians had one, as we learned in the last podcast, that has now, after a bitter defeat, been given. Not given, it was taken from the Amazonians by Steppenwolf. Here we see Falco throw down the trident, and he is challenging Arthur to claim the throne. Don't let Orm have it. Of course, all that plays out in Aquaman, James Wan's Aquaman. And I think James Wan's Aquaman fits well within what Zack Snyder's doing. Is it different? Is it a little more lighthearted? Sure. but it's not a complete departure from this. By the way, if you guys don't know, WB has this thing called the Noble Collection. And the Noble Collection sells like prop replicas and stuff. Most of their stuff's Harry Potter related. My wife's got a ton of it. She's got the Firebolt. She's got the Golden Egg from Goblet of Fire. But they have Aquaman's Trident, and it looks so cool. I'm so tempted to get it. It's like $50-$60. Check that out, noblecollection.com. Now Steppenwolf, we're back in Chernobyl, and we see Steppenwolf communicating with an agent of Darkseid known as Desaad. Again, Jack Kirby, New Gods, completed by Jack the King Kirby of comics. If you don't know who co-created with Stan Lee, all those Avengers you love, and some would argue is more responsible for their creations, but that's a story for a different pod. And now we have him saying that he has located the mother boxes, the other two sleep, but he and the parademons will retrieve it. And he talks about the scent that they can smell. This is a cool scene, and this was played in the trailer. It really establishes the stakes. It talks about how the Kryptonian is not here. The Amazonians will fall. No lanterns, that type of thing. And just establishing the lore of the, not just DC Universe, but this version of the DC Universe, the DCEU. And even though Steppenwolf is talking to this almost hologram of Desaad, they really did a good job with this. This is where a lot of those visual effects. By the way, this movie kept so many visual effects artists employed over the course of COVID. Studios were not putting out movies because theaters were closed, but this thing had like close to, I know it was well over 100,000 visual effects shots that needed to be finished, and that kept a lot of them in studios. A lot of those visual effects studios in business, and now we learn that he's been banished here. Steppenwolf, as he says, no lanterns, no Kryptonian. This world will fall like all the others. Such a great line, because he betrayed Darkseid, and then you got the great for Darkseid. And this is going to be one of, I think, 2 times that he will communicate with Desaad before we get toward the climax of this film. And that's just something that this 4-hour runtime allows you to do. Now we are at Gotham Harbor. You see Batman working on this plane that he cannot get to fly. And we have, now this part was in the original theatrical cut of the film, but he talks about how he can't get it to fly, Bruce. And of course you have Diana say, I know a man who would love to fly, and of course referring to Chris Pine's Steve Trevor. This is like a troop carrier. There's a name for it. It's the Fox something. I don't know. I'm assuming it's named after Lucius Fox, but it's neat how they get it eventually to fly. We'll get there. And this is where you see that line, the attack is not coming, Bruce. It's already here. And this is going to be some of maybe the best exposition dump in any superhero movie ever. What we're getting ready to hear. This history lesson here. Of course, this is the Age of Heroes, and here we go. We're flashing back. This is what differentiates this from a Marvel movie. To me, this is epic scope and scale. This is pure mythology, and you are seeing it played out in what is the first team-up movie. We're not talking about the 4th team-up movie like we got in Endgame. Here's the first movie, and it just shows you how big the stakes are. It's so cool because we have the gods, we have men, we have the Atlanteans as they prepare for a Darkseid armada, and then of course we have the Amazonians on horse. There's so many. There is Antiope, played by the great Robin Wright. Such a cool thing with this flashback that we get to see her come back, and here comes Darkseid. This is one of the coolest money shots of this film. He just jumps out of his carrier and boom, grabs that dirt. Man, he looks He looks really good here. I know a lot of people don't like the shirtless look. He's got that Omega symbol on his chest carved out, which is, of course, his symbol. And the Omega beams will be how he unleashes his power. And he is leading the charge as he takes his weapon and just starts to turn the earth to rubble as lava erupts here. And that Omega symbol is highlighted, and that is just bringing in the reinforcements here. This scene was butchered in the original cut. Now we see that Darkseid at this time is in possession of a mother box at this point. He's in possession of all 3 mother boxes. Excuse me. And here we're seeing the unity, which will cleanse a planet and allow him to basically terraform it into a version of Apocalypse and force everybody to be servants. We have the Huns here fighting. We have this great charge by Hippolyta. Man, she is very prominent in the early. I forgot how much she, and I'm glad she is, how much she was in this early part of the film. The Vikings here. And then the charge is on. I mean, we're talking Return of the King style fight. And at this point in the film, we are 1 hour and 2 minutes in, and we see our first Green Lantern, who was the first Lantern. I don't even recall his name. He is like on a painting in a Jeff Johns version of the story, I believe. I was listening to an interview with Zack Snyder, and he didn't even know his name, so I'm not going to feel too bad about not knowing that. And they are trying to stop this unity from synchronizing. This just, it has to be seen. I think the henchmen being able to fly, really, the 4-3 benefits that, because you see them swooping in. Man, Zeus here is just on full display, just wiping people out. The guy is shredded, and you're getting to see Zeus and Ares and a Green Lantern fight Darkseid. This is what you paid for HBO Max for, and just this incredible shot of him cutting the hand off and a Green Lantern ring flying away as Darkseid tries to grab it, but is pierced by arrows. Now, Darkseid in here are the Atlanteans. And the purpose of Darkseid invading now is that humankind, the world is too divided to stand against the threat, whereas at this time, the Age of Heroes, they stood together, and of course they're going to defeat Darkseid as Ares pierces him with an axe. They put together all their differences to come together to solve a common problem. That was possible for past generations, not just in the DCEU, but in our country. And it's a very, very resonant parallel, because think about the problems that past generations of the United States have come together to solve, such as defeating fascism and getting out of the Depression. But when it comes to something as simple sometimes as wearing a mask to save people's lives, we're too divided, and that is why we fall. Again, the history teacher coming out at me. But they have defeated Darkseid, and he is retreating somewhat with his tail between his legs. Now, this is a young Darkseid. Darkseid, in his younger days, as a kid, is known as Uaxis. And I may be mispronouncing Darkseid's name. I've only read it. I've never actually said it. Everybody just calls him Darkseid. I think it's Uaxis. Maybe it's Uxus. If you leave a comment below wherever you're enjoying this and let me know if I'm pronouncing this wrong. And the Atlantean King cheers as Darkseid and his armada retreat. You may think this makes Darkseid look weak, but it was them standing united that defeats Darkseid here. That is the differentiator. Of course, we know, even though they stood united, the casualties were immense, and it took them coming to an agreement to dividing the mother boxes up to make sure that power was not concentrated into the hands of one group, to assure that somebody like Darkseid would never return. Now could humanity be trusted with this type of power? This is the age of heroes. Obviously, that's not where we're at this point in the DCEU. And it's not where we are at in this point in world, and specifically American history. And you see them putting away the mother boxes. A lot, again, one of the best exposition dumps in all superhero movies, and you're seeing each of them put it away. So the Atlanteans, very cool how the sea monster is on that one. And I'm just the scope. I mean, it's almost like, I'm not to sound blasphemous, but it's almost like biblical. And I do think this scene right here is what makes this a different type of superhero movie. It is a sprawling Lord of the Rings type mythological epic that has not been attempted, and probably, if you were having to meet a theatrical window runtime, would not have been attempted in one theatrical sitting in one film. This would almost be better served, a story this grandiose, to be told over a TV show rather than a movie. That being said, I'm glad I watched it in 2 sittings, and I'm glad they dumped it all at one time. But they could have released this week by week. I think each part, while it does make up the sum of its parts very nicely, I think each part kind of stands on its own. And now we are cutting away from the history lesson as we get toward the end of the Age of Heroes here, which is chapter 2. And look, this is the Trinity right here coming together. The Trinity came together. We lost Superman. And now Batman and Wonder Woman bear the weight as the guardians of humankind to protect against a threat like Darkseid. And that is going to be the end of chapter 2. We are pausing at 108, which will then move us on to part 3 in our next episode of Zack Snyder's Justice League, chapter by chapter. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you're subscribed to us on iTunes if that's where you prefer to listen to your podcast. If you can, rate and review us. You don't have to write a review if you don't want to. Just give us 5 stars if you enjoy this podcast. If you're more of a Spotify person, follow us on Spotify. If you listen to us on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Feel free to leave a comment. The best thing you can do for us on YouTube, though, is go and subscribe. Our subscribers have been going way up, and we thank you guys so much for that. Of course, all of this great content that is possible because of you guys, the listeners, is chronicled and cataloged at its official home, its original home, the Epic Review, thepicreview.com. And while that is the original home of this content, maybe the most convenient home at this time is youtube.com/confirmed epic podcast. Thank you so much. And once again, from the lush landscapes of Metropolis, for Zack Snyder's Justice League chapter by chapter episode 3, which focused on part 2, the Age of Heroes, I've been the real Brad Bell. Please follow me on Twitter there at TheREEL Brad Bell. And I am out.
The bell's been rung. Out in the dark, among the stars, the god is dead.